Okay, I think it's about time. Good morning, everyone. It seems this is going to be a very small room, small audience. So in this session, I will have 4 presenters. The first one is me, and then we'll have Yue Yan to talk about translation, and then Esther, who is going to talk about grammatical description, I believe, and Patrick has worked. Did some work on second language acquisition, and his presentation has been uploaded on YouTube. We'll see what we how we proceed with that one. Okay. All right. So my topic today is called Move Options in Action Exchange, and I'm from the University of International Business and Economics in Beijing. All right. Today I'm going to talk about 3 things. So because there's something called action exchange in my topic, so I'm going to talk about what action exchange is first, and then I'll talk about the existing description of the move options in action exchange in discourse semantics, and then I'll talk about how I developed the move options in my own study. Okay, so what is action exchange? Action exchange is also known as directed exchange in Barry's work. It is concerned with negotiation of the carrying out of an action. So Barry made a distinction between primary actor and secondary actor. So she identifies primary actor as the person who is actually going to carry out the action being negotiated, and the secondary actor is the person who is not doing that action. That person is getting the other person to do the action, perform the action. Now, if we take a look at an unnegotiated action, which means the person directly performs the action. So, for example, someone might enter the room and see the papers flapping about on the desk, and that person closes the window. Or we can negotiate that action. So, for example, the secondary actor can request the action. So, could you close the window, please? And then B goes on and closes the window. So here we're saying that the non-verbal realization of the action is part of the exchange because it's syntagmatically related to the linguistically realized move. So the action of B is positioned in relation to A's utterance. Okay. Excuse me. So in the first instance, we've got the performance of the action directly by B, but at the same time, B can also promise before they performs the action. So could you close the window, please? B could also say, okay, and then go on and close the window. The action does not necessarily happen right away. So, for example, in this particular exchange, B is promising the performance of action. So when you go downstairs, could you turn off the central heating, please? Okay. And then after a while, B might go downstairs and turns off the heating. The exchange can also be initiated by the primary actor, so the person who is actually going to perform the action. So here A said, shall I close the window, please? And then A closes the window. So A is the person who is going to perform the action. So would you like some coffee? Yes, please. And then A pours the coffee. Aside from things happening before the action, negotiating before the action can also be followed up. So secondary actor can follow up by saying thanks. So would you like some coffee? Yes, please. And then A pours the coffee and B says thanks. So because B does not perform the action themselves. Or you don't need to negotiate the action. So for example, in the second example, A, when they entered the room, for example, the paper was flapping on the desk and closes the window, and B can say thanks. So here still we have a secondary actor follow-up. Further, we can have primary actor follow-up. So shall I wrap it for you? Yes, do. Okay, thanks, no worries, which is quite common in Australian English, I guess. All right. What Barry was concerned with was the co-occurrence and sequencing restrictions. So what this means is that which elements of an action exchange are obligatory and under what circumstances, and which elements of an action exchange are optional and under what circumstances. According to Barry, the carrying out of the action under negotiation is obligatory under all circumstances. So someone has to carry out the action in order for the action exchange to be complete, right? Or well structured. So shall I wrap it for you? Yes, do. So we have to have the okay. Thanks, no worries. And she calls that particular move A1. So 1 here means primary and A means actor. So primary actor positioning move. And all the follow-up elements after A1 are optional under all circumstances because the action has already been carried out. So for example, after OK, the thanks would be analyzed as A2F. So here 2 means secondary, and F means follow-up. So we've got a secondary actor follow-up move. And this can be further followed up by A1, so which is the primary actor, so primary actor follow-up moves. And these two are optional under all circumstances. So when the primary actor delays the performance of action, there are 2 elements preceding A1. Yeah, so shall I wrap it for you, which is called DA1. D here refers to delay, so delaying the performance of the action. And A2 is the secondary actor row or slot. So we've got a structure DA1 initiating, delaying the performance of action, asking whether A2 is okay with the action, right? And then we've got A2 agreeing, and then the primary actor performing the action at A1, which is further followed up by the secondary actor and the primary actor. A2 is also obligatory when the action is requested by the secondary actor, right? So we have to have an A2 if the action is requested. So could you close the window, please? Has to be there for the A1 to be realized in this particular case. And we can represent this in terms of system network. If we look closely at the first part, so an action can either be unnegotiated, which means you directly perform the action, or you need to have some sort of negotiation. So here, then when there's a negotiation, then A2 is obligatory. So we have to have an A2. But the A2 might be preceded by a DA1 if the exchange is initiated by the primary actor. So we've got DA1 positioned before A2. Or if it is only a secondary actor initiated exchange, then A2, A1 would be enough. And then we need to make a decision between whether you're going to immediately comply or you're going to comply later on. So if you are going to immediately comply, then A1 would be realized non-verbally, right? You'll go and do the thing. And if it's prospective compliance, then you have to have a verbal promise before you actually perform the action, because it's not going to happen in that direct, in that very moment of speaking. Okay, now that's action exchange. Now, what are the move options already there in our existing model of discourse semantics? In order to answer that question, we need to take a look at the semiotic address of the system of negotiation, which is part of which is the action exchange I just introduced. So if we take a look at this table from Martin's English text, we've got two strata, so discourse semantics and lexicogrammar. We know that discourse semantics is realized by lexicogrammar. Yeah. And then at the level of discourse semantics, we have a rank of exchange rank and move rank. So here, action exchange is here in the negotiation system as exchange rank, And the functions we just talked about, so DA1, A2, A1, and so on, are realized by move options. And in Jim Martin's work, the move options are based on Halliday's speech function. So I'm sure we are all very familiar with Halliday's speech function. So we've got initiating and responding, or giving and demanding information, or goods and services. And we've got different speech functions. If we put it in a table that we might be more comfortable with, here we've got giving or demanding goods and services, and then we have initiating and responding moves, and these are the primary speech functions Halliday identifies. Now, if we apply this existing model in our analysis, we would analyze this exchange. Could you close the window, please? Okay, as an A2A1 structure at the level of exchange, and then at the level of move, at the rank of move, we will analyze the first one. A2 is realized by a command, and A1 is realized by an undertaking. So you comply to the demand for goods and services. But why do we need to develop the move systems if we already have a system in our existing literature? Because when we face with exchange that's more than two moves, we'll have problems. So, for example, shall I wrap it for you? It's a DA1 at the rank of exchange, and its realization is an alpha. And yes, to be an acceptance of that alpha. Yeah, but how do we analyze the follow-up, the following three moves in terms of speech function? Because speech function only deal with initiation and response. The problem here is that the system of negotiation and the system of speech function are both concerned with the sequencing of moves. So they're concerned with similar things. The difference is that the move system, the negotiation system deals with up to 5 moves, the ones we just looked at, but the speech function only deals with 2 moves. And this is actually quite, we can actually see this from Halliday's own formulation of speech function. So he said, the most fundamental types of speech role, which lie behind all the more specific types that we may eventually be able to recognize, are just 2, giving and demanding. Either the speaker is giving something to the listener or he is demanding something from him. Even these elementary categories already involve complex notions. So giving means inviting to receive, and demanding means inviting to give. The speaker is not only doing something himself, he's also requesting something of the listener. Typically, therefore, an act of speaking is something that might more appropriately be called an interact. It is an exchange in which giving implies receiving and demanding implies giving in response. So there's some sort of expectancy relation going on between giving and demanding. And Berry, in relation to Halliday and Matheson's formulation of speech function, also commented that, so she was talking about initiating and responding instead of giving and demanding. So she's saying, this is, for me, not a real choice. One doesn't choose between initiate and respond. One can only choose to respond if someone else has first initiated. So initiate and respond are not paradigmatically related. They are syntagmatically related. So in her opinion, initiating and responding are not choices. They are functions positioned syntagmatically. So similar to her way of looking at exchange, initiating and responding are analyzing exchange instead of moves. And I feel similar about giving and demanding, as we just looked at in the previous quote. All right, so that's what's there in the existing model of discourse semantics. Now, because of the reasons I just mentioned, I'm going to develop the move systems. Now, how am I going to do this? I'm going to reason about move options from above with respect to exchange structure, so that it's related to exchange structure and not, so that we can say something about the realization, the relationship between exchange and move in terms of realization. And I'm going to draw on various notion of move options available at different places in an exchange. So Barry did this with another kind of exchange, which she calls informed and illicit exchange, and later known as knowledge exchange. Sorry, there's a typo on the slide. This kind of exchange is exchange of information. So for Barry, at each point in an exchange, what speaker does is to select between knowing and not knowing. And in my own work on knowledge exchange, I propose that this is true for both speaker and addressee. So speaker would be positioning themselves as knowing or not knowing, and at the same time making predictions about the knowledge of the addressee. So what I'm going to propose in this presentation is to say that for the negotiation of carrying out of an action, what's at stake is speaker and addressee's responsibility. So is someone responsible or not responsible? And because of the time limit, I'm going to focus on move options at DA1, A2, A1, DA1, A2, A1 structure. In other words, I'm going to only look at one type of structure and show you how I reason about move options in action exchange. Okay, now let's take a look at DA1. Now, DA1 predicts the performance of an action by the primary actor at A1 after the acceptability of the action is checked with the secondary actor at A2. So DA1 at this slot, the speaker checks whether an action is okay or not, right? And then performs the action. So therefore, we can say that at the DA1 slot, the speaker is positioned as responsible. Now, if we analyze this in terms of what we just said, then we would say that the speaker here is positioned as responsible, and SPKR here means speaker and ADRS means addressee. The speaker plus R means responsible. So the option of speaker responsible is selected. This is quite apparent in English, because in English, for imperative clauses, we would need to include that pronoun. So shall I wrap it for you? And also, this also tells us that at DA1, the addressee is not positioned as responsible. But the responsibility of this kind is not necessarily coded as explicit across languages. So some language does not really code this. Now, if we take a look at an example from Khartoum Mongolian, which is a language I'm working on. So here we have an exchange between mother and daughter. So they were making cakes and deciding whether they should start the blender. And the mom asked, shall I start the blender? Yes. And then the mom starts the blender. Now, at DA1, because of the way we define DA1, we know that the speaker is positioned as responsible. But we can't really tell whether the addressee is also positioned as responsible, because we don't have the kind of pronominal realization of the modally responsible participant as we do in English. So to see how the addressee is positioned at DA1, we need to consider the way the positioning of the speaker in the following A2, which is the addressee at A1, affects the flow of exchange. Now, if we take a look at the second move here, we code the modally responsible participant in Khartoum Mongolian through the suffixes. So here the suffix is an imperative second person suffix, which means that at A2, the speaker is not positioned as responsible. But the same initiating move can have a different kind of response. So here we've got a different suffix, which is imperative first person inclusive suffix, which means let's do the thing together. Now here, then the speaker is positioned as responsible. But does that mean that, what does it mean in terms of exchange structure analysis? Here we would have a different kind of structure, because at A1, the speaker is positioning themselves as responsible, right? So the structure wouldn't be DA1, A2, A1, it would be A2, A1 instead. Okay, so which means that, DA1, A2, A1 structure here, the speaker, the addressee at DA1 is similar to English, positioned as not responsible, because the speaker at A2 wouldn't be positioned as responsible, right? If the speaker is positioning themselves as responsible in the second move, then the structure would be A2 A1 instead of DA1 A2 A1. Okay, I'm going to go a bit over time into my Q&A time so that I can finish this. So what about A2? So the positioning of the addressee at A2 in this type of structure is determined by the positioning of the speaker at the preceding A1 and expected A1. Yeah. As discussed earlier, the speaker position at these two slots they're responsible. So DA1, DA1 and A1 at these two slots, we've got primary actor. So they are positioning themselves as responsible, which means that the addressee positioning as A2 would be responsible. Okay, so we would need to carry out that positioning at the A2 slot as well. So at A2, the speaker is positioned as not responsible, but the addressee as responsible. And we can use the same analysis in English. So shall I repeat for you? The speaker is at A2, the speaker is positioned as not responsible and the addressee as responsible. Let's take a look at the last slot, A1. Now we know that A1 is the primary actor slot. So in this slot, the speaker is going to carry out the action. So at A1, the speaker would be positioned as responsible. Yeah. Okay. What about the addressee? The addressee role would need to consider the way speaker is positioned in the previous move. So here we would say that the not responsible positioning in the previous move is carried out at the A1 slot. Okay. Now this is just one type of exchange I looked at. So after considering all the possible structures, here is the move system I'm proposing. So this system comprises two parts. The first part is about the speaker. So the speaker may not be positioned in either way, or they may be positioned. When they are positioned, they would be positioned as responsible or not responsible. And for addressee, the addressee might be positioned as responsible or not, or the addressee may not be positioned in either way. Now, if we take a look at the small exchange we just looked at, so DA1, A2, A1 structure, at DA1, the speaker position responsibility is selected and the addressee position not responsible is selected. And at A2, the opposite options are selected. And then at A1, the same options are selected. So one might wonder, then are the same move options selected at initiating and non-initiating A1? So if the exchange starts with an A1, would that be different? Are the same options selected at initiating and non-initiating A2? Right. So we just looked at non-initiating A2. What about an exchange that starts with A2? And you might be also wondering, what about the A2F and A1F, and what about challenging and tracking? And of course, I wouldn't have time to talk about all these. I did explore this in my PhD and in relation to knowledge exchange also in a journal article. Okay, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to your questions and comments.
Hello, Mus. It's Shruti. I have a question. Hello, how are you? I'm not clear how you decide who's got responsibility. Like I'm clear with exchange structure, how you decide the other things, but what are the criteria in English for deciding who's got responsibility?
Thank you for your question. There are two criteria. So one is we will start from exchange structure analysis. So for exchange structure analysis, you would need to see which moves are obligatory, right? And then determine which one is A1 and so on. And after you decide that, you would know that, because of the way we define what A1 means, DA1 means, we would say something about the responsibility of the speaker. That's one criteria.
So because they're going to carry out the action,
yeah,
they are the one who's responsible.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also the other one would be to look at, for example, the pronominal realization as the one I just showed, like, shall I close the window? Then here we've got the pronoun I, right? The person is not saying, shall we close the window or shall we move the table together? So that's another way. And then also we've got imperative clauses.
So within a DA1 move, if
Mhm.
they refer to themselves only, it's responsibility. If they refer to both of us together, that's different. And then, of course, if they ask you to close the window, they're not DA1, are they?
No, right. Yeah. So we can look at both, look at criterion both from exchange structure and their realization in the lexical grammar. Thank you for your question. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question. I think you said, hi, excuse me if I've missed something here, but I think you said it's not, that different languages have different kinds of realizations of this type of structure. Is that, because in your examples, it seemed like there was still the same kind of idea of responsibility or not responsibility.
Yep, thank you. So I didn't mean that different languages has different structures. What I'm assuming is that they've got similar structure at the level of discourse. So if we look at how people organize moves in an exchange, I only know English, Chinese, and Mongolian, so I looked at these kind of exchange, and also from the work of our colleagues, we can make some sort of generalization and say there seems to be similar types of structure going on. What I meant was that, but the way responsibility, whether responsibility is the way they are coded and how they are realized are different across languages. So for example, in English, you would say, shall I close the window? Here we've got the I pronoun, right? But in Mongolian, for example, I would say, 정hinani. There's no indication of the person who is going to perform the action. So we would need to look at what's happening before and after the exchange to determine how the addressee is positioned in that particular language, instead of just looking at the lexical grammar. Yeah. Thanks. Now, we've got 2 minutes left. So if you have a very quick question or comment. And I can't see our second speaker. Okay, I'm just seeing the chat box. Yes, and also Shushi does some work on responsibility as well. So that would be interesting to compare and look at how these works are related. I didn't have time to include that in my discussion. Okay, it's about time. So if you don't have any questions or comments, we can move on to our second speaker. That would be Yueyan, I think. Is she here? She's not here yet, so we can take a short break and see if she'll come in on time. But if she doesn't show up, Esther, do you think you can jump in if your Ian doesn't show up?
Yes, if she doesn't show up, I can.
Okay. Let's wait for 1 more minute and see whether she shows up. Okay, we might as well get started. Esther, if you are okay with it, you can share your screen. So the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Good morning, everyone. So I will be Esther Sari. I'm from Ghana, the University of Cape Coast. And I'll be doing a transitivity analysis of body parts via enjoy expressions in Akan. So the presentation is structured this way. I have a brief introduction. I'll go to the research methods employed, and then I'll move on to the discussion of the results. And I have a conclusion. Okay, so human experiences, both the outer and then the inner experiences in languages, many languages across the world. There are various resources for conceptualizing and classifying them. So inner experiences, including our emotions, our thoughts, our beliefs. And then in the grammar of many languages, emotions are expressed in 2 ways. So we have the conventional or arbitrary terms, and they have the metaphorical ways. So by metaphorical way, we mean emotions as abstract concepts are concretized. So they are expressed in terms of concrete concepts or objects. So one of these ways of expressing emotions metaphorically is by making reference to body parts. That is to make somatic reference. And then this expression by making reference to the body part is common in many languages, but especially in African languages. So this is an illustration of the 2-way presentation of emotion, expression of emotions I'm talking about. So for the conventional terms, we have happiness, joy, anger for English. And then we have shro or for Akan. So here the meaning, the word that denotes the emotion, they have no kind of link. But then for the second way of expressing emotions, we have an example in English, they start in joy. So here, although joy is arbitrary, it is presented as a physical, a concrete item. So it's as though joy is a location that the experiences of the emotion find themselves. And then in Akan, we have enijie, which means I and then collect. So that translates as happiness in English. So here we express the emotion joy by making reference to the eye. So when the eye sees something and it pleases the eye, then we experience that emotion. And then we have also I am shishie, that is having a burning sensation in the stomach, and that translates as fear in English. So in this study, we are applying the system of transitivity to the analysis of body part expressions. That is the second way of expressing emotions, by making reference to body parts. We are applying the system of transitivity to analyze these expressions that are encoded with body parts in Akan. So Akan is spoken in Ghana, and then the middle and eastern parts of Ivory Coast. So it's one of Akan has two main dialects. We have the Chi and the Mfanti, but then the Chi and Mfanti also have sub-dialects. In this study, we are focusing on one prominent sub-dialect of Chi, which is Asante Chi. Okay, so as I said, I am using the system of transitivity, specifically the transitive model. So the expressions will be analyzed in terms of process types. And then here are some past research on emotions, and then transitivity analysis on Akan, and then languages such as English, Zulu, and then Chinese also. Okay, so the data for this study was gathered from these domains. So I have discourse data. I retrieved some from a corpus, although it's not published, but then the account component of this corpus, it's named Niger-Congo Archive of Languages. And then I also retrieved some from Akan Literary Test. And then I engaged some native speakers of Akan in a focus group discussion where I was able to elicit some of these body parts, fear and joy expressions. And then I also retrieved some from already published works, notably by Ansa 2011, Ajikum 2018, and Afre 2015. They have worked on fear and then joy in Akan. And then at some point, I also constructed examples since I'm a native speaker of Akan. So in all these fear and joy expressions encoded with the body parts, they were mostly delivered as sentences. And then, I have 47 sentences for joy and then 35 for fear. But then since the unit of analysis is the clause, I chunked the sentences into clauses. And then I have 50 for body part joy expressions, and then 41 for fear expressions. So I have a total of 91 clauses for the analysis. Okay, so in Akan, fear and joy, the emotions we are looking at in this study, they are expressed in terms of 8 body parts. Some of these are external body parts, some are internal organs, and they are also invisible body parts. So we have Akoma, which is the heart. We have Okra, which is soul. So Okra is the citation form. In the clauses, you mostly see Kra without the initial prefix. And then we have Hom, which is spirits. We have Botox, which is Etuo. And then we have stomach, which is Yem. We have eyes, which is Eni. And then we have intestine and Sno, and then the self, which is in Akan. And so the analysis, the transitivity analysis reviewed that these body parts expressions of both fear and joy, they occur in 4 process types. So material process, mental process, relational process, they are for joy, both joy and fear expressions. They recurred in these process types. And then behavioral process is specific for only fear expressions. So the joy expression did not review patterns for behavioral process. And in all of these process types, the body parts occur as participants. Okay, so I begin with the material process, and then I have these templates for material process. I have 5 templates for both fear and joy. So in template A, we have body parts as performing actor, realizing actor in template A. And then in template B, we have the body part expression also as actor again. And then in template C, body part is still actor. And then in D, body part is go. And then in E, body part is accompaniment. So these templates, they reflect both transitive and intransitive material clauses. So here are some illustrations of the roles of the body parts in clauses, material clauses. So in for fear, body parts realize actor and accompaniment in transitive material clauses. So for example, 1, we have meyem de mepram. So meyem, my stomach, is the body part fear expression. And then it selects a single process as a single verbal unit as process. And then the go is the one who is experiencing the emotion. And then in such constructions also, there is mostly an attribute. So there is the effect of the action on the goal is presented as attributes. So this attribute is mostly an idiophone, and it's realized at the clause final position. So that is what we have here as pram. So it's an adverbial group. So this translates as I got scared, and literally it means my stomach made the sound pram. Okay, and then for 2, we have body parts fear expression realizing accompaniment. So here we have first row ne ahupupo. So the clauses, this part of the clause that realize the material process, but I should have added the other clause. But regardless, first row ne ahupupo. So accompaniment is realized as the coordinators, So we have stro, which is a non-body part and fear expression, and then it's joined with the conjunction ne, which is and then to ahupupo, body shaking. So that is the body part fear expression. So the clauses, let us take fear and shivering to do the work of our salvation. Okay, so in material clauses, transitive material clauses, body part fear expressions can be actor or accompaniment. And when they are actor, they are realized by possessive body parts. So here we have the possessive pronoun meyem, and then we have in the accompaniment is realized as a coordinated unit. Okay, for joy occur in material clauses as actor and go. So it is actor in intransitive material clauses and then go in transitive material clauses. So in example 3, that is a intransitive material clause. We have joy, enijie abefie. So the joy, body part joy expression is enijie, and it's a compound. It's made up of a body part now, which is eni, the I, and then it's and then a verb, which is j. So we have a body part compound or a nominalization. And then it selects only one verbal unit as a process. And then in 4, we have body part joy expression realizing go. So we have ede enije rayemu. So the actor is the impersonal pronoun e, and then it's conflicted in the verb. So this is prevalent in Akan. In Akan, when the initial actor is realized by a pronoun, it is often conflicted in the verb. So that is what we see in 4. And it's so for many other examples like so. So because the initial participant, that is the actor, is realized as a pronoun. It's not realized as a different component of the clause. It is conflated in the process. And then here also, mostly when there is more than one participant in the clause, the process is realized by a serial verb. So here we have a serial verb realizing the process. In 4. We have de and ra. So we have these realizing the process. Okay. So we have body parts also occur for both fear and joy. They also occur in mental clauses. So they occur in two types of mental clauses, the emotive mental clause and then the perceptive mental clause. And in both clauses, the body parts, fear or joy expression, realize phenomenon. They realize phenomenon. So we have these two templates. Template A, we have phenomenon plus process plus sensor. So here the body part senses the experiencer of fear or joy. And for template B, we have sensor plus process plus phenomenon, and then an optional circumstance. So here the experiencer of fear or joy perceives body part expression during a period. So template A typifies mental clauses of the emotive type, and then template B typifies mental clauses of the perceptive type. So let's see some examples of template A, mental clauses. So example 5 is a joy expression. So we have mohotemu ewie. The body part realizing phenomenon is it takes a pre-verbal position. So it is mohu. It is realized by body parts in possessive construction. So mohu is the self, and then mo is the second person possessive. That is realizing phenomenon. And then in 6 is also a body part fear expression that reflects template A. And then we have meyem shishemi. We have the phenomenon again being realized by a possessive nominal group. Meyem, that is my stomach. And then we have shishi, which is a reduplicated form of Ben. And then the sensor is represented as the one experiencing the emotion. So this translates as my stomach is burning me, and it means I am scared. And then these are also examples of template B clauses. We have 7, which is a joy expression. Oh, mehu enijie pain. So mehu is the sensor here. The phenomenon takes a post-verbal position. So mehu, and then the body part joy expression is enijie, which is a nominalization. And then the circumstances indicates time. So it translates as I have experienced joy before, or I have seen joy before, literally. And then we have 8, which is also a fear expression. Mate akumatusem anopei. So the sensor is conflated in the process. And then we have the phenomenon again, taking a post-verbal position, and then it's realized as a nominalization, akumatusem. And we have circumstance indicating time, anopei, this morning. So it translates as I have heard scary news this morning. Okay, and there are also body part fear and joy expressions in relational clauses. So the clauses, they reviewed patterns for only the attributive type of relational clauses. And then we have the intensive attributive, circumstantial attributive, and then possessive attributive clauses. So I have these 5 templates for the relational clauses, the attributive relational clauses. In template A, body parts realize attributes. And then template B, body parts realize attributes again, but the positions are not the same. And then we have template C, where body parts express attributa. In template D, body parts express realized, possessed. And then in E, body parts realize attributes again. So here are examples. Set templates A and E. They reflect the intensive attributive clauses. So we have example 9, which is a fear expression in the intensive attributive clause. So we have COVID-19 ahobabo panieno enye ayemhihie bia. So COVID-19 ahobabo panie is career, and then we have attributes which comes after the verb. So we have ayemhihie, stomach burning, it's a nominalization, and then it occurs as attributes. So it translates as the COVID-19 vaccination isn't scary. And then we have 10, which is a joy expression. Aforeboye enijie. So here, aforebo is career, offertory, and then the verb is be, and then joy is the nominalization, enijie, and it's realizing attributes. So we could see that in intensive attributive clauses, the body part fear and joy expression, they realize attributes in intensive attributive clauses. And then template B is for circumstantial attributive clauses. So here we have 11, example 11, where the ayemhihie. So where there is a topic construction, and then it means ask for this. And then the attribute is realized as a nominalization. So ayemhihie, stomach burning, and then we have the process as ni, and then we have career as mu. So the body part fear expression in circumstantial attributive clauses also realize attributes. And then 12 is a joy expression. So here the joy expression enijie is again realizing attributes. So the participant's role of body part fear and joy expressions in circumstantial attributive clauses is attributes. Okay, and then the final template C and D, they are possessive attributive clauses. They are possessive attributive clauses. So I have example 13, which is a fear expression. So ayemhihie amamenya hypertension. So here the fear expression realized attributa. Ayemhihie, it's a nominalization. So stomach burning, and it realizes attributa. And then because there are more than one participant, the verb is serious, realized as the process is realized as a serial verb construction. So we have ama and menya together as the verbal elements realizing process. And then 14 is a joy expression. Yewo enijie wasroho. So yewo is the possessor, and then enijie, which is a nominalization of joy, is possessed, and then wasroho in the top there is circumstance. So for the circumstantial possessive attributive clauses, joy, body part joy lexicon occur as possessed, and then occur as attributor in fear expressions. Okay, and then we have the final process type, which is behavioral clauses, and then this is unique to only fear expressions. Joy expression did not review patterns for the behavioral clause. And then in the behavioral clause, the body part fear expression realize behavior. So the template is behavior plus process plus optional circumstance. And then here the body part engages in a behavior. So the process is presented as the behavior that the behavior is putting up. So there's an example, metoresa. So meto is buttocks, first person singular buttocks, possessive construction. And then the verb is resa, the progressive form of dance. So my buttocks is dancing. So we see that the behavioral clause shares some grammatical features with the material clause, such that they are both realized by dynamic verbs. So here we have resa, dance, but then the dynamic verb in behavioral clauses is of lower transitivity than the material clauses. And so here, although the behavior is presented as a dancing, but then it's not dancing physically. It's just a metaphorical dancing that the behavior is putting up or engaging in. Okay, so far you've been looking at the transitivity templates, that's body parts that are encoded with fear and joy expressions that are encoded with body parts occur in. And then we saw that they occur in 4 process types: material process, mental process, and relational process. And then we have behavioral process also unique to fear expressions. And so in all of these process types also, we noticed that the body parts expression, they play participant roles because they are nominals, they are noun groups, they play participant roles in all of these process types. And then the findings of this study, it contributes to the scholarship on emotions and systemic functional linguistics as it provides empirical evidence. And then it is also significant for the description of the grammar of other languages. And so I have a recommendation that in future research, others can look at other Akan dialects other than the Asante Twi. As I mentioned, there are other dialects such as the Kuapem and Infante. And then we can also study transitivity and pattern in specific discourses. So here the data was used from varied domains, so it's not specific to any particular discourse. But then you can look at transitivity analysis of these body part expressions in specific discourses. And then you can also study other less study types such as love, sorrow, and then pity, and others. So here are some bibliography. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther. We still have some time for questions and comments. Any questions from the audience? Now, I probably will start the discussion with my own question then. Esther, how do you distinguish between material and mental processes in your dialect? What is the distinction? Okay. How do we know when we look at a process and say that's material or mental?
Material or mental. So we decide that based on the process, the kind of process that is used. So in the material processes, we will see dynamic verbs. You see dynamic verbs like we saw in the example. And then in mental clauses, we mostly for the perceptive type, you will see verbs such as verbs of perception, like see and then hear. So the kind of the verb that realizes the process helps to distinguish between the various process types.
Okay, so you determine the transitivity based on the realization of the process. Okay.
Yes, the nature of the verb that realizes the process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions and comments?
Sorry, earlier, did you say that there was work in other languages on this kind of emotion expressions? Did I hear you give some references on those earlier?
On
emotion expression, this sort of not the same, but similar type of
in other languages.
In other languages, yeah.
Yes, there are many of them. So I have some in the bibliography. There are in English, in Chinese, and then in Akan, there are many of them. In Zulu also, there is.
Yeah, because I was just thinking as you were saying that, you know, in English we do have, I mean, I don't know of the work on it, but just thinking to myself, we often, if we're scared, we might refer to something about our stomachs, churning or something like that. And also in Thai, for example, they use heart a lot for a range of different emotions, from fear to, sorrow to love to all sorts of things. So anyway, very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone have other comments or questions? Well, if no, thank you very much, Esther. We can proceed to the next speaker. So since the UAEN didn't come, our second speaker didn't really come, we might proceed to Patrick.
Hi. I guess I had a video up too, but I can give a live presentation. That's probably better, I guess.
Would this have everyone watch the video? I watched your video myself, so I'm not sure whether everyone else did.
Sorry for making you suffer too.
No. You wouldn't. I would.
At everybody's level.
Think about what you were doing. Yeah. Okay, so people may not have watched it. So yeah, if you can do a live presentation, please do so, or you can just play the video if you feel like it. Whichever is fine.
I guess I'll do live.
Okay, sure. Okay. Thanks.
Still not so good with Zoom. Let's see. Sorry, I'm so slow.
It's okay. Probably Esther needs to stop sharing it. Cool.
I'm sorry, I have it in the editor view. I know I always have trouble if I put it in the presenter view. Everything on my computer gets covered up by the presenter mode.
Sure.
Okay. Let's see. So I won't read it. I'm not gonna. But this is my dissertation, and I looked at. I graduated a year ago, and my dissertation was on the beliefs SLA doctoral students had about the use of about educational technology and second language teaching in general. And the data analysis was mostly a thematic analysis, but I did use a little bit of SLA theory. I'm sorry, SFL theory. I used Unsworth's theories on image-text relations. So after I finished my dissertation, one of the themes was the participants expressed a lot of beliefs about the ideal practices of teachers. So I thought I would use SFL theory to go back and look at some of that data. And this is kind of the rationale for my original dissertation, just that because these participants are planning to become teacher educators, so what they believe about teacher practices and educational technology is important, I thought. And so I did a literature review. I don't really need to talk about it probably for this purpose, the purpose of this presentation so much, but I looked at teachers' beliefs about educational technology, discussion thread use. DS means digital storytelling in teacher education. That was one of the course projects, and that's where I applied Unsworth's theories on image-text relations. And then I just used, for this research now, Halliday and Thompson's work. So And these are just different ways that digital storytelling has been used in teacher education for identity work, reflecting upon experiences, exploring issues, and teacher knowledge. And the research took place in a university in the southeast of the United States. It was a doctoral program focusing on second language acquisition and educational technology. So a core summer course, a summer seminar on the use of computer-assisted language learning and mobile-assisted language learning and second language education. And the participants were 16 doctoral students and 1 doctoral candidate in that program. And it was a very international group from countries all over the world. China, Cuba, Indonesia, Kuwait, Libya, it goes on. And most of the participants had language teaching experience. And many of them were planning to become university instructors or teacher educators. And they were a sample of convenience. It was this, I was in the same doctoral program. And that's just the data collection. So the two at the top were coursework discussion threads and digital stories they collaboratively created. And that's where they expressed some of their beliefs about teacher practices in both of them. And then I just added interviews. I randomly selected 7 people and I made a digital survey. 12 of them responded to it. And this is a theory I used to look at the digital stories. So 3 aspects of Unzwer's theories on image-text relations were concurrence, complementarity, and connection. I also did thematic analysis. So the discussion threads was almost all thematic analysis, but digital stories, I used this and thematic analysis. And so for this research, I was looking at modality, in particular modulation obligation, because the participants in their discussion threads and digital stories, they talked about what they thought the ideal practices of language teachers should be, what they should do, what they should learn about. But also, when I was going through this data, a lot of times when they talked about what teachers should do, how they should teach, they often used a third person plural, we. So I'm wondering if maybe it's inclination. So please feel free to give me any feedback or help. I'm still working on this. And then looking at orientation. So to analyze their expressions of obligation, this is what Halliday and Mathewson and Thompson talked about. So implicit or explicit expressions, and subjective and objective. And this is something I'm kind of struggling with. I'm new to, I still don't understand SFL theory very well. So I keep going over this in Halliday and Thompson. So I guess implicit when the modality is expressed in the same clause, and explicit when it is expressed in a separate clause. And then also if their expressions are subjective or objective. Whether it sounds like, if they say teachers should use educational technology, does that viewpoint come from them, or are they expressing something objective? Maybe it's a teaching standard or something. Okay, so when you put those together, you can get an orientation: subjective, explicit, subjective, implicit, objective, explicit, and objective, implicit. And the value, the degree of obligation, high, medium, or low. That's something also I'm kind of struggling with a little bit. I need to do more background research for sure. And this is an example of coding I did. I just highlighted the clauses that had the expressions. I didn't want to delete all the other text, then I would lose context, but this is basically how I'm going through. I had already coded all of the discussion threads and the digital stories. And I'm going back through it for things like beliefs about teacher obligation or ideal practices. So I'm going back through that and I'm trying to analyze it for orientation and value. So I thought it would be interesting to look at, for example, where does the belief about the practice come from? Is it the participant saying that teachers should do something, or are they expressing a belief that someone else has? And how strong is that belief, high, medium, or low? So I put question marks there because I'm not entirely confident about mine. It's a reminder to me that maybe have to go through. So this is the process I'm going through now. And the next slide. So this is how I did the initial coding with MaxQDA, qualitative data analysis software. And so I coded, the data is on the right. And this is an example of a synchronous discussion. They had one every week over a 6-week term. And so the red dots on the left are, my eyesight's going up. Those are the codes, and that's the on the right, that's the actual text. So when you click on the code, it highlights it. I really thought that was a useful tool for coding. Especially you can come back and look at things again, it's easy to find. Okay, so these are the beliefs from thematic analysis that I think this is helping because it gives me an overview of what their expressions about beliefs are. That they believe that students need to be able to serve their student needs. Oh, they should learn about their students. They should employ student-centered educational practices. They need to learn about educational technology and keep up with developments. They need to, the second to last one is they need to employ educational technology to motivate their students and improve learning outcomes. But the last one too, they said a lot, was that they need to apply critical thought before choosing, implementing, and using educational technology. So there has to be a reason. They should use it, but they have to have a reason for using it. And next slide is, this is me trying to, an attempt at coding. So for example, this statement at the top, I think instructors and instructional designers must update their knowledge about new tools and trends continually to be able to effectively implement them in the classroom. So I put that as orientation. I put that orientation as subjective explicit and value as high. Because of the word must, I thought it was high. So I'll keep going. So a lot of the expressions were they would talk about teachers, they might use the third person, they, and suddenly it would switch to we. So I was wondering, is that obligation, inclination, or both? Or does it matter? I'm not sure. Oh, these are some examples. I am all in favor of the application of gaming in the classroom, but we have to make sure that we adhere to certain standards. So I don't know, maybe you can make an argument that it's both obligation and inclination. Okay, and then the discussion. So I thought something interesting was the authority to make statements regarding ideal practices. So I also looked, when I looked at this data, I also looked at as through the lens of a community of practice. So the participants were mostly first and second year doctoral students, and they're developing an identity as up and coming researchers, language educators, language teacher educators too. And they're trying to develop that identity. And the digital stories they made in the project, in the course, were to promote the use of educational technology in second language education. But they were told the audience, it was an imaginary audience, but they were told the audience were teachers undergoing professional development. So the instructor in their course kind of positioned them as experts. So I thought that was interesting. So where is their authority coming from when they're making statements? Is it themselves, or are they using, for example, standards? so implications for research. So I thought that would be interesting for research on identity, beliefs about practices. For example, do you have the authority to make statements about ideal or obligatory practices? And also, I'd like to learn more about SFL theory, and hope that I can make any contribution to its use more in language teacher education. Basically the same thing I'm repeating myself. So the limitations. Understanding SFL theory has been really hard for me. So I have to read it over and over again. And also, I may have overlooked a lot of statements in the data where they talked about ideal practices. And they might have stated, they might have made statements about ideal practices in kind of indirect ways. So I have to go back and look at the data. And then some statements can involve more than one topic. So I might not be accurate in my description of the statements. Okay. So this presentation, I'm probably going to learn more from, I'm probably more likely to learn more from the audience than I can share. But any comments or questions?
Any questions and comments from the audience? I found the study very interesting, so I might as well start the discussion with my own question. I was wondering if you can tell us a bit about what you meant by digital storytelling, because when I was watching the video, I thought that was the main data, one of the main data you were looking at, right? And I didn't quite understood how it works. So what kind of stories are they? In what sense they are stories? What are the participants talking about in the story?
And well, there's different ways to define digital storytelling. And the professor in this course, he kind of used a broad, you could say more that they were promotional videos, sort of. They promoted the use. The directions and the course directions were they're supposed to be in a narrative format. So kind of like a story. But when I actually got them and saw them, they weren't really that so much in a narrative format. They were more promotional. They explained different kinds of educational technology and offered reasons why students should use them. So they made arguments. And they were around 7 to 10 minutes in length. And they were group projects. So each group made a different one on a different topic.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks. Any other questions or comments? Well, I have another one.
Okay.
Okay. So I was thinking about how your modality analysis was related to what you were talking about by the end. So you were talking about where what kind of authority the students were drawing on when they were talking about the obligations for the teachers, right? In terms of what kind of technology, educational technology they need to master and how they need to use it. I didn't quite see how your modality analysis fit into all of these. Can you explain a bit how you were integrating all these?
Well, I thought I would look at so the degree of obligation, whether they thought it was something very strong, they like must do it, or it's better if they do it, and also like the source of it, whether implicit and explicit. I think the terms I'm already forgetting.
Right. So you were thinking about the source more in terms of when the realization is explicit as another clause, whether that relates to the source of the obligation. Is that what you mean?
Yes, I'm sorry. You're expressing it better, much better than me. Thank you.
That's why you were wondering whether the pronoun we actually changes the modality.
If it's so, because sometimes they would switch back and forth. They if it's they, it's more obligation, and then if it switches to we, is that inclination? Or so are they saying I must do something? Or is that obligation, or is that inclination, or maybe it's both? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should use both, because a lot of what they talk about is also what they plan to do or want to do.
Well, the way I understood the modality system is that when Halliday was talking about explicit and implicit, he was talking about the congruent and metaphorical realization of modality. And he was, so in terms of the, I can't really tell which one is which either. So when he was talking about metaphorical realization, for example, I think the pronoun was more restricted to the first person. So yeah, it might not tell you a lot about the sources of obligation, because the impression I got was that the description does not really account for the source of obligation from the system itself. So it's more about metaphorical and congruent realization of modality. So which one is the more unmarked and which one is more marked way of talking about modality. So I didn't think that the use of we would actually affect your decision. So I must and we must doesn't really make it a different kind of modality. That's how I understood the description. But also,
compare we to they, is it different though? Do you think?
Excuse me.
If you compare we and they,
mm-hmm.
Would that be different?
As far as the category of modality is concerned, I don't think that would make any difference. So they must do something versus we must do something doesn't really change the modality itself. But yeah, I agree that it's an interesting phenomenon to explore as far as teacher identity is concerned. I'm also wondering whether you considered using engagement in the appraisal framework in SFL. Are you familiar with that framework?
I've only read about it a little, but do you think that would be a good thing to look at?
Yeah, I was wondering I was thinking that if you are interested in, for example, the sources of authority or the voices, then, and also these students are taking stance in terms of their attitude towards educational technology, right? So I thought when I first saw your data, what immediately came to my mind was appraisal. So both in terms of the way that these students evaluate the use of educational technology, and also in the way you were talking about the sources of authority they were drawing on when they express their opinion. Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's actually going to solve your problem, but yeah, that the framework came to mind when I first saw your data. So,
well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I just wonder also if you, as well as something like engagement, if you look at perhaps transitivity and agency, you're talking about we and they, so which participants are appearing as agents, that might, I don't know, give you some idea about the authority that the students are construing as the agents and that kind of thing. So yeah, transitivity might be something else you might want to look at.
Thank you.
Yeah, hello, Dong Minh.
Hi,
How is this going?
Our second speaker didn't show up, so
Oh, same
Patrick
with the,
is
the final speaker in my session, Asmat. She hasn't joined yet.
I'm
So
guessing you
that's
also
all.
watched Patrick's video.
Yep.
Did you come with any comments and questions?
Patrick, no, I haven't got a chance to your session, and last day I was so busy with my opening speech. Okay, I'm sorry, Patrick, but I will catch up.
Oh,
I just
don't
told
worry.
you, yeah.
I can just imagine how busy you are organizing a whole conference. So
Yeah, I will watch the recordings, as many recording as I can after the conference. But yeah, during the conference, I just selected some, or especially the session that I chair. Okay, so thank you very much. Okay, so Patrick already finished his session, right? His
Yeah, so if
discussion.
the audience don't have any questions regarding Patrick's presentation,
Okay.
then yeah, this is all.
Okay, so we have 3 sessions. It's okay if we can end early because people can have a good break from Zoom, and we can come back at 2 p.m. this afternoon to enjoy the session this afternoon and the preliminary too.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, we can back to the main room, and if we finish our session, and we feel free to attend Sally's session on multimodality and media. I believe you have the final presenter now. So she still have four presentations in her session. Okay, thanks very much.